2023 was a big year for Embraer. Not only did they grow the E2 order book by 40%, but they also did things like launch a new P2F conversion program. Coming into the Dubai Air Show, the Embraer team was rightfully feeling good. And at the show, I had the chance to speak with Rodrigo Souza, Embraer's VP of Marketing and Strategy, to learn more about their recent winning streak. The conversation we had was super interesting, with Rodrigo giving me hints into Embraer's next clean sheet jet and discussing its plans to challenge Boeing and Airbus. And he was kind enough to let me capture the entire conversation to share with all of you. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this fascinating look into the future of Embraer.
So thank you very much, Kobe. I'm Rodrigo Souza. I'm responsible for marketing and strategy for Embraer Commercial Aviation. So I deal with marketing of current products, but I also support the discussions, market forecast, new product development, so anything regarding strategy and marketing.
So this is a very big air show for you. I think Dubai is really interesting for Embraer specifically because this region in particular, the Middle East, you have a lot of city pairs that are smaller, and at the same time you have a regional fleet that tends to skew way more towards wide bodies. So can you speak to the market potential that Embraer has, particularly in this region?
Yeah, so we see really a big opportunity, right? Just some numbers. Only 16% of all markets in the region have at least one daily frequency and load factor higher than 70%, which is the minimum that you should have to be profitable, which means that you actually have 84% of the markets could be better served, let's say, if you use smaller aircraft like the E2. So I think we will see some good deals coming from the region for Embraer.
Sure. I think you guys also maybe got some indirectly good news, or at least a positive indicator at the show. Tim Clark of Emirates, he came out and he said the A350-1000, the engine is kind of small compared to other aircraft of that size, and it's not able to spend enough time on wing for his needs. Dust ingestion, sand ingestion is a really big problem in this region, but you look at the E2 specifically, and the engine is massive, right? You got a lot of sand, a lot of debris that's just bypassing the core altogether. Do you see that as a potential competitive advantage in the region?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. We are seeing the PW1900 on the E2 engines suffering much less than in other platforms, right? Sure. In general, the fact that the E2 is lighter, it has less drag, requires less thrust, the engine has a much better performance. Longer time on wing, we have less issues, less engine removals. So that is valid globally for Sure. any operation, but I think particularly in the Middle East, that will be a big advantage of the E2 in the region.
So that was going to lead into my next question, which is what is it about this engine that is making it more reliable, right? It sounds like really it's just, it comes down to thrust. You don't need as much because it's a smaller airframe.
Yeah, exactly. So the DTF has a different behavior than previous generation engines, right? Yeah. Traditionally, the deterioration of the engine was basically due to takeoff thrust. In the case of the DTF, we see takeoff and climb. So actually it's an extended period of the engine being deteriorated. And because we require less thrust also for climb, right, is actually proving, showing that the advantage that we saw during the design phase actually, right, we designed it to be lighter, is actually proving bigger than what we thought.
Sticking to that design point, something I actually learned recently is that the E2 family, it has bespoke wings for each different family member. The 190's wing isn't the same as the 195. Obviously the wings are very big, which is great for this region because they generate a lot of lift. But I would imagine that it would make design more complicated, it would make manufacturing more complicated. So what's the rationale behind making the wings different? What is actually different about them? And what sort of complexities does it lend to the program?
Yeah. So it's about the value proposition of the E2. Different from other OEMs, we didn't want to only change the engine, right? Yeah. It was not a matter of maximizing return on investment.
Sure.
So we took an existing platform and we introduced all the possible new technologies that we could, which includes new wings.
Yeah.
And then we had a decision of, shall we simplify the design and do one wing for all the members, the 190 and 195, but to be consistent with the value proposition that we want for this airplane? No, we want to maximize efficiency. Everything that we can do to reduce fuel burn, reduce emissions, we will do. So the basic wing is the same, but actually the wing tip is different, optimized for each member of the family, 190, 195. And we can see in the end results, right? So the E195 E2 now has a better fuel burn compared to E1 of over 25%. 25. You don't see that, in other platforms compared to previous generation, right?
Sure. While you have redesigned the E1 into the E2, I think it's notable that you decided not to re-up with the smaller Embraer kind of legacy jets, right? The E135, E140, E145. And I think that's really interesting because we've seen this kind of divestment from the space, right? Mm-hmm. Bombardier sold off the CRJ program to Mitsubishi. That program doesn't have a lot of life left in it. And when that happened, it kind of vacated the market for Embraer to just take over. So help me understand the rationale behind suspending the production of those planes and why you didn't do something like re-engine those aircraft, much like you did with the E1.
Yeah, so that is a market very important for us, and we continue to look at solutions to address that market. So we have positioned ourselves, Embraer, as the leader of aircraft up to 150 seats. And the 50-seater market is an important part of that. The issue is that as we see new technologies emerging, right, like hybrid propulsion, those new technologies are to be introduced first in smaller aircraft, right? Yeah. And that's the work that we have on the Energia family. It's a series of concepts ranging from full electric up to hydrogen airplanes. We believe probably an aircraft in that capacity, it will have to be a disruptor in terms of a new propulsion system. So we will have not abandoned that market, to the opposite actually, but we have to wait until the technology is really mature to introduce a new platform.
I see. So now that those aircraft have been phased out, kind of the next smallest member is the E175, and those E2 variants, it's struggled to sell, the core market hasn't been able to purchase it. So what is the state of the program? Where are we today in flight testing, development, stuff like that?
Yeah, so one characteristic of all those new airplanes, right, and actually the new generation engines, is that they are more efficient, but they are heavier. Right? Because the bypass ratio is bigger, so that means bigger fans, which means heavier. And the problem is that in the United States, the regional flying is done under the scope clauses. Yep. Those scope clauses, they define the size of aircraft in terms of number of seats and the maximum takeoff weight that regional aircraft can have in that market. And the E175 E2 exceeds that limit, right? The E175 E1 doesn't. So when we designed it, we thought that in the long term, airlines would be able to negotiate with pilots to relax that, to introduce more efficient aircraft. But that has not proven to be true, right? The pilots union have been difficult to negotiate. They have not opened the opportunity so far to relax that clause. We don't see that happening in the near future. So while the main market, which is US, continue with those regulations, the E175 E2 will be paused. But on the other hand, the E175 E1 continues to be the only aircraft able to meet those scope clauses. It's a very reliable aircraft. We are seeing actually revamp in the demand for E175. So we have already this year orders from American Airlines, from United. So I think we are covered in that segment buy the E175 E1.
Yeah. I think it's very notable that it's still selling,
Yeah.
right? You know, the E1 program is still fairly young, right? It's not an old platform at all.
We launched the aircraft in 1999, but the first delivery was in 2004. By 2013, we introduced a series of modifications that improved the aircraft fuel burn by 6.4%. That is a lot for an existing platform.
Yeah.
So that actually went like half a generation forward.
Yeah, almost an E1.5. Right?
Exactly, right? So that's why it continues to be a very efficient and profitable platform for regional flying in the United States.
So, refocusing back on the E175 E2, I'm curious, when a program is suspended, what's happening behind the scenes? Is there still development? Is there any testing? How do you kind of maintain continuity for when that aircraft is eventually ready for service?
So we prepare all the documentation, right? So we keep that ready for whenever we need to restart. It's easy to restart. We maintain the prototype in conditions that can reassume flight test whenever we need. But it's really minimum work, let's say, at this time. The engineers, the team are deployed in other programs, for instance, to continue develop the follow-on functions of E2, like the steep approach that we just certified, for instance. So that's the work that we have nowadays.
Yeah, let's talk about that. For those who didn't catch the news, the E195 E2 is now the heaviest aircraft that can operate in and out of London City. And I think that presents a really interesting market opportunity because everyone knows that the airports in London are kind of a mess, right? You can't expand Heathrow, there've been all of these slot limitations, but now airlines have an organic way in the E195 E2 to potentially grow capacity at London City without increasing aircraft movements, which is very sensitive because these planes fly over downtown London. Tell me a little bit about what this generally means for the E2 program as a whole, not just within London, but also potentially in other markets too.
So London is a very important market for all European carriers. We have a big customer base of E1 in Europe, so it really represents a big opportunity. More than 80% of the movement in London City is done by E-Jets today. And the fact that E195 now becomes the biggest, it's actually a win-win-win for everybody. It's win, of course, for the airport because it can increase the number of passengers transported, right? Without increasing the number of movements. It also can increase the number of flights without increasing the noise for the community, right? We are talking about over 60% reduction in the area affected by noise of the aircraft. And of course for Embraer, because it's a big selling point of the airplane.
You know, obviously the E195 E2 is Embraer's marquee aircraft of today, but everybody in the aviation world is always looking forward, right? And I think you kind of alluded to this earlier in our conversation, that Embraer is working on some other demonstrators, some concept programs. So looking forward, what are you guys doing as far as future aircraft programs?
The main work nowadays is on the Energia family. We are evolving significantly in understanding the potential of each technology. For now, we are concentrating on two main concepts: a hybrid electric concept that could have entry to service by 2030, and a hydrogen with fuel cell with entry to service by 2035. So I would say that is the next big opportunity for Embraer Commercial.
So is it safe to assume then that the E2 will be the last Embraer aircraft that will be primarily driven by kerosene jet fuel?
I'm not sure. I wouldn't say that because we continue to look at opportunities to bring better products to the market. So whenever we see any other opportunity to develop a new airplane that can bring benefits to customers, we'll do it.
Sure. So maybe an E3 or something down the line.
Yeah, or something in those lines. Yeah.
Yes. these demonstrators or these concept programs that you're working on, they're a little bit smaller than the E2. But as we've seen kind of in the last couple of years, there's this real appetite for slightly larger aircraft, right? You look at the A321, you look at the 737 MAX 9, thousands and thousands of orders have been placed. And considering your engineering prowess, considering your experience, is there any interest in potentially moving upmarket and building a plane that's a little bit bigger to challenge something like the 737, A320, something like that?
Yeah. So we see the upgauge movement because the larger members are more efficient. But what that does is actually to create more opportunity for us, because more and more airlines are looking to complement their larger narrow body fleets with this size of airplane.
Sure.
So actually that has been increasing the demand for the Embraer E2, and that's where we are concentrated our efforts for now.
Sure. Yeah, Boeing and Airbus are almost implicitly vacating this space.
Yes.
And so it just makes sense to capitalize on that opportunity.
Exactly. The market will search for the most efficient airplanes. In the narrow bodies is the larger members. That creates an opportunity for this crossover segment to grow even more.
And Rodrigo, to wrap things up, when you think of the future of Embraer, what is it that gets you most excited?
I think it's the fact that we continue to develop always new products that can help customers to tap into new opportunities. It's amazing, right? We bring the aircraft to the show, and it's amazing to see the customers, how they get impressed by the aircraft, the economics, the level of efficiency. And then we extrapolate that to the work we are doing with Energia, right? That will come soon. Hopefully we are able to develop the technology and make the business case work. And we are always creating those new opportunities. We are always looking to accelerate opportunities for our customers, and that's what is really good about working for Embraer.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing what those new airplanes eventually look like.
Yes,
Rodrigo, appreciate the time.
Thank you
so
very much. Yeah.
So, there you have it. That's a look into the future of Embraer. I want to give Rodrigo a massive thanks for being so generous with his time and expertise. And of course, I want to give you all a thanks for watching the video. Your support is what's allowed me to travel to air shows like this and bring you all sorts of cool behind-the-scenes content. If you'd like to help the channel even more, you can always check out my Patreon, which I'll link right here. And if you want even more behind-the-scenes content, then you should check out Kobe Explores, my new second channel. Oh, and this conversation inspired me to make a different video about who might be the next E2 customer. If that sounds interesting to you, you can check it out right here. Thanks again for watching, and until I see you again, don't forget to look up.